Okay, we have an upcoming presidential debate. We have voter fraud, believe it or not, and we're going to go a little bit deep on that. We have the transgender community using the different alphabet agencies to harass doctors. So much more to go through all this. I have Sara Gonzales with me. Sara, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So just for some background, Sara is a fellow YouTuber. She's also the host of Sara Gonzales Unfiltered, and she works with Glenn Beck and Blaze TV. A story I wanted to just jump right in on is, according to former CIA Michael Waller, who's been on my show twice, welfare offices in 49 states around the country are handing out voter registration application to illegal immigrants. No proof of citizenship, no questions asked. They're just trying to set them up in order to be able to vote in the upcoming election. What do you know about this story? What could you help us better understand?
Yeah, I mean, so I just recently did a Blaze Originals documentary called Voter Fraud Exposed. And it goes into just the many ways that the left is trying to rig the game when it comes to our elections. And in many ways, they are legal avenues that these people are taking and trying to, just kind of benefit in their own favor. And then there are, of course, illegal ways, which I'm sure, the social media and big tech overlords do not want us talking about. They made that very clear after the 2020 election, which, by the way, Stephen, as you know, was the safest and most secure election of all time. Don't question otherwise.
Yes,
and
yeah.
So they're doing things that this is not the first time we've heard of them giving these illegals documentation, forms to fill out so that they can get an ID, and then they can go and vote. Because in states like Michigan, for instance, this is where our documentary really honed in on the state of Michigan, because that has been one state that has just completely transformed their election laws since 2016. People think it started happening in 2020. It started happening in 2016 because the left didn't think that they were going to have to go through these steps to keep Donald Trump out. Okay, they misread the room. And so after 2016, they went, holy crap, this guy wasn't supposed to get here. This guy was not supposed to be in office. We have to do what we can to prevent that from happening. And so now what you see in places like the state of Michigan is you see they have a constitutional right in the state of Michigan, a constitutional right to vote by mail-in voting. We all know that mail-in vote, makes it more susceptible to voter fraud. Take France, for instance. They banned mail-in voting in 1975 because they found all these studies that had shown that it was, of course, more prone to things like voter fraud. And so you see all of these states that are working with George Soros, and this is not a conspiracy theory. You can go look it up. It's called the Secretary of State Project. So you see these states that are working with George Soros, bringing in these secretaries of state who will change the guidance that the officials have to use and change things, manipulate things so that we're not checking things like signatures on absentee ballots, right? We're not checking signatures on mail-in ballots. We're not checking whether or not this person is an illegal immigrant who shouldn't be able to vote in our elections. And this is something that I kept warning people was coming whenever we started seeing all of these local places, San Francisco, New York City, Washington, D.C., who are now allowing illegals to vote in local elections and in local, ballots. And so I said, guys, if you don't think that this is intentional, if you don't think that this is on purpose, that they're, they have to have an ID. Well, now that they have an ID, let's register them to vote. And so you think that this isn't intentional, you're crazy. The writing's been on the wall forever that, of course, they're importing millions and millions of people from the third world and giving them a handout, expecting that they are eventually going to give them the right to vote. And I don't think it's going to be any surprise who they're going to vote for.
Well, and didn't they find pamphlets between Panama and Mexico where literally it says, when you get in, make sure to vote for Joe Biden. That's the reason you're able to get into America right now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it couldn't be more clear. And then you're called a conspiracy theorist if you actually say what you're seeing in front of your very own eyes, which is they're bringing all of these people in for a certain reason.
Yeah. Another example that really bothers me, where it was illegal and legal, is up in Pennsylvania, where now 3 years later, a court has determined, wait a minute, there was 100,000 ballots with no date, a bad date, or the date was after the election had already ended. And they said, no, 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 go ahead and count them. And now they're saying, oh, all of those should have been thrown out, but we're not going to change the outcome of the election.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it is. One of my worries is that this might actually be the first election where South America, Central America, the Middle East, China, and more, they actually vote in the president, not the American citizen.
I mean, I think that you have an absolute right to have that concern. I share the concern. And I would say that, I mean, we are living at such an unstable time in this country. You think about the idea that at least half the country, if not more, cannot trust the validity of the election results. That's a scary time. I mean, I know that we've been hearing this for a long time from the left, even though they will call us, election deniers and insurrectionists and all sorts of other, names, politically charged names, I would say. But I mean, you've heard them whine about it for a very long time. Now we're seeing so much overwhelming documentation that this is actually taking place. It's just that they've rigged the game so that oftentimes you can't actually prove it, right? You see the fraud taking place. You see them changing the rules. You see them changing the guidance. You see them importing all of these people, and they have changed the rules ever so slightly that, like I'll take the state of Michigan once again. The Secretary of State there has issued guidance to the officials, which thank God just got overturned by the courts, but she issued guidance to officials to say, you actually have to presume that the signatures are correct. You can't just presume that you need to check the signatures. The presumption is, of course, that the signatures are valid. I mean, imagine a time where that should be the presumption if you are actually wanting a free and fair and secure election. So it's really terrifying. And I can't blame you for sharing those, concerns, because I have them as well. And I don't know how we course correct in time for November. I think there's time to do it from here on out if we get the right results of the election. But I mean, you're talking about a time where Republicans may not win another federal election as president. I mean, for a very long time if we don't fix the system.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, they started right after 2016 changing the laws, preparing for maybe a pandemic, maybe not. I can't prove that, but it looks suspicious nonetheless. But one of my big worries is you have Laura Trump, who is saying we have thousands of attorneys on hand to deal with this, and I'm like, they're already 4 years ahead of you. Right. Mark Elias working for Hillary Clinton. Yep. They've been changing the law, and then now that they have it in place, it's harder to get a law off of the books than to get it onto the books, and so they are clawing like crazy to keep those mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, all of that. It's really concerning.
Yeah, Stephen, I'll add this to your concerns about changing all of the laws in 2016. I mean, sure. Do we have proof that there was a pandemic in place all along? No. But what I can tell you is they seemed to pivot very quickly. They seemed to know what they were going to do very quickly. They seemed to suggest all of these mail-in ballots and drop boxes and all very, very quickly is all I'm saying. Okay. So clearly there was a contingency plan for at a certain point. Maybe it was too early or too late. I don't know. But it seemed to me like there was a contingency plan all along. You're right about Laura Trump, who I've had on my show before, and she's very wonderful. And I don't disagree with her point that this needs to be rooted out. But to your point, how much of this is too late? The left is consistently 20 steps ahead of where we're at. And so, of course, they've been chipping away at this for so long. I'm glad that Ronna Romney McDaniel is now out so we can actually affect real change. And I'm glad that the RNC, under the direction of Laura, is doing things like, suing. Again, I hesitate to bring up the state of Michigan. They're suing Pennsylvania too, by the way. But these states they're suing because, in this instance, they've got a bunch of counties that have more registered voters than adult citizens in those counties. You're talking about 105% of the population in some of these places is registered to vote. So that's going through the courts. And do I expect it to be adjudicated? I mean, I hope so. But even then, we have so many activist judges, you never know where that's going to land. It depends on whose lap it falls into. So, I mean, I do get very concerned. Again, I don't want to discredit what she's doing, because I'm glad that someone is finally handling it. But we needed someone handling this day one after the election in 2020, not, March of 2024 when we have an election in November.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm glad she's doing something. I'm definitely not harping on her, but it's like, I guess like an analogy would be like, okay, hey, we caught the skin cancer on the surface. The problem is it's already in your lungs.
Right.
It's already
Right.
deep from years of not knowing about it. I want to switch gears. You had an opportunity to sit down with Attorney General Ken Paxton of Texas, basically the Letitia James of Texas, right? And he pointed out that there's not a lot they can do about election fraud, even though he believes there was. And that's why they brought that lawsuit against Georgia, which ended up being tossed out, unfortunately. But what he said is a lot of these lawsuits, 900 of them, they get funneled to these district attorneys like the Alvin Braggs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because they're installed by George Soros money, they go, nothing to see here. And they just throw it out. And so he's saying, listen, in a rigged system, you can continue to keep the rig going because at the district attorney level, it's been bought and paid for by Open Society and George Soros. What was your takeaway from that sit down with him?
Yeah, one of the things I think that has been the most, I don't want to say black pill, because it's not necessarily a black pill, but one of the things that I was most incredulous about in my journey as a broadcaster was the confirmation that I got from Attorney General Ken Paxton that it doesn't matter how many good laws you have on the books. If you don't have a district attorney who is willing to prosecute based on the laws, it doesn't matter, right? So in the instance of voter fraud, it doesn't matter if you have a local DA who is brought in by George Soros. Again, one of those, I mentioned Secretary of State project, as you rightfully point out, Stephen. Open Society they have been funneling these local DAs, these radical leftist DAs, in a lot of different places across the country. And so if you have one of these George Soros DAs that doesn't want to prosecute voter fraud, that doesn't even want to look into voter fraud, it doesn't matter that you have laws on voter fraud. Same thing goes for things like, I talked to him as well about the state of Texas and let's say the Daniel Perry. I get Daniel Penny and Daniel Perry confused. The one that was just recently, he was convicted of murder and then had his case overturned by the state of Texas. And so by Greg Abbott, I should say, credit where credit is due. I don't always agree with Greg Abbott, but he got it right on this one. But you have, we could have all the laws on the books about self-defense, because this was a self-defense claim and it was a valid self-defense claim. You can have all the laws on the books granting Texans the right to self-defense. You can have the strongest self-defense laws across the country. But if you have a local DA like they did in Austin, if you have a local DA who is not willing to, go through that, then they're going to prosecute the wrong thing. So we have a DA here in Austin and of course across the country, as you point out, Alvin Bragg. We've got, Letitia James. We've got places in California. They've got these left-leaning, I shouldn't even say leaning, these leftist DAs as well. And so what they're doing is they're not prosecuting the actual criminals. They're dropping charges on these criminals. You had like the Summer of Love, where BLM was burning cities down across the country. They mostly had their charges dropped. Whereas, you have all of this political persecution against conservatives. And so it was just such a crazy realization to me when I was like, wow, it really doesn't matter what the laws are on election fraud, on crime, on self-defense, on any of these issues. If you have a leftist DA, it doesn't matter. If you're a conservative, the cards are stacked, the deck is stacked against you, and God help you if they can get you on anything, whether legally or illegally, they're going to try to throw you in prison.
Yeah. No, it's scary to go up against the law. The number one thing I think they do is they're just like bankrupting people because it costs so much to legally represent yourself. Okay, speaking of lawsuits, a lawsuit in London, England has revealed that Trump-hating Paul Ryan, who ran as vice president for Mitt Romney, of all people, had possession of the fake Russian dossier all of this time. So the whole time that they're spending $40 million investigating Trump, they're having, all of these people subpoenaed. You're having Kash Patel, like, digging in, trying to figure this out. He has the dossier and the source and knows that it's fake. And yet he did nothing in order to humiliate Donald Trump, divide the country, and try to get Trump out of office. What do you think about this bombshell information coming out now?
I mean, it's a disgrace what these people are doing to this country, all because, a man's words hurt their feelings. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Donald Trump tweets mean things. Oh, I'm supposed to be so sad that Donald Trump said something mean to someone. Donald Trump said that, rapists and murderers and criminals are coming across the southern border. By the way, spoiler alert, they are. I mean, these people are so broken that they are willing to watch the country burn because they feel hurt by a man foretelling the truth. It is so disgusting to me that we continue to see. And by the way, remember, the Hillary Clinton campaign paid Fusion GPS, and nobody did anything about that. They paid for all of this fake information. They paid for the fake dossier. And we were told for years, how many years were we told? I think on some channels, we're still being told to this day that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, right? Donald Trump colluded with Putin. And so it's just wild to me that these people can't see. What are you doing to the country? You're just dividing us even further. And for what? For what? For all of his flaws. Look at where we were under Donald Trump before COVID hit. Look at where we were as a country. We were, just everything. The economy was booming. Everything was much better than it is now. I mean, unless you're an illegal. If you're an illegal living in this country, things are way better for you now than they were with Donald Trump in charge. And so it's just really disgraceful to see these people who think they know better. I know we get a lot of flack. Well, I don't want to speak for you, Stephen, but I get a lot of flack for calling out the deep state. And there are a lot of people who say that's just a conspiracy theory. That's not happening. And it's like, how much more evidence do you need that these people, whether they're directly in government or whether they're working with people who are in government, these people think that they know better than us, American citizens. They think that they have the right to subvert the rule of law and subvert the order in which, these decisions are supposed to be made, and just make them themselves by withholding information, by lying to FISA courts, by doing all of these things that they do in order to control and manipulate the outcome. And it's just disgusting to me.
Yeah. I don't know if the deep state watches my show, but I know that I'm on Zelensky's kill list. Just found that out in the last week. So I guess telling the truth that Ukraine is losing, and that America probably shouldn't keep stealing taxpayer money to send bundles of cash and weapons over so that more young people can be killed. But what do I know? Now I'm on the kill list for them. You brought up that some groups are still pushing this Russian story. Nobody pushed the Russia hoax more than CNN and Jake Tapper.
Mm-hmm.
He's now supposed to give an unbiased moderation of the presidential election campaign with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. How is this debate going to go? Is he going to be able to remain unbiased, even though under his skin and under this suit, he just has like Trump derangement syndrome?
I mean, I think the short answer is no. There's no way he's going to be able to be unbiased. Now, CNN would tell you otherwise, but CNN also, talk about rigging the outcome of things. Well, they're doing that by, setting all of these rules that we've never seen in a presidential debate like this. And now they are setting the stage to create a favorable outcome for Joe Biden. I mean, you even had one of their own CNN analysts, Chris Cillizza, saying this, that these rules, these new rules, these unheard of rules are going to only benefit Biden mostly overall. So you've got they're going to mute Donald Trump's microphone so he can't talk when Joe Biden is talking. Clearly, we know that would rattle Joe Biden. There's no live audience, so the audience can't get into it. I mean, they have all of these new rules. And what makes me frustrated is I wish that Donald Trump would not have agreed to those rules. I understand he's very ready to, mop up the floor with Joe Biden, and I don't blame him for that. But I mean, these rules are so ridiculous and clearly meant to favor Joe Biden, because we all know that CNN is in the tank for Joe Biden. And so is Jake Tapper going to be unbiased? No, of course he's not. Is that going to stop CNN, I should say, from going on air the next day and saying, we were so unbiased and objective. Great job, Jake. I mean, of course, we're going to see them do that. The reality of the situation is going to be much different, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that they're probably, based off of James O'Keefe breaking into the CNN conference call somehow and finding out that they literally had a huddle every morning on what are the negative things we could say about Trump today.
Yep.
Like that's a real thing. Like, you just know that right now they are huddled together going, okay, we've got to lead him into traps. We've got to start coming up with things. We're going to start, immediately we got to put, Donald Trump tries to speak over muted microphone. Like, they are going to come up with the most ridiculous things to say. But it's gonna be interesting to see how this debate goes, and whether Joe Biden, who could barely stay awake in Europe for the Normandy celebration, if he suddenly has the energy of Hitler, then we'll know that he is definitely drugged up on something. You've been covering this story. This whistleblower doctor exposes hospitals in Texas for breaking the law, doing gender reassignment surgeries, genital mutilation surgeries. Instead of protecting this whistleblower who's trying to protect children, Biden and Democrats are now trying to jail him, remove his medical license, ruin his life. What can you tell my audience about this horrible story?
Yeah, it really is egregious. I mean, a lot of people think that Donald Trump is the only one that has all of this political persecution going on. And in reality, it goes so much deeper than Donald Trump. And there are so many average Americans who have found themselves in the crosshairs of the Biden regime and the Biden's weaponized DOJ. For this one in particular, it was Dr. Eitan Haim, and he was a trauma surgeon at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas. And so back in 2022, Attorney General Ken Paxton actually released guidance that basically declared any sort of gender affirming, child sex change, any sort of gender affirming care constitutes as child abuse in the state of Texas. And he said that he would pursue any and all legal actions against anyone who took part in that. And so shortly after he issued that guidance, Texas Children's Hospital, that had previously had a child transgender, department, basically said, okay, we're shutting this department down. Well, what happened was much different. They kept the department going in secret. They didn't advertise it. And this doctor ended up witnessing that they were continuing to do this without the public knowing. And so he blew the whistle on this. And, he said, this is illegal. You guys are doing this in secret. This shouldn't be happening. And so what ended up happening to him was the FBI showed up at his doorstep and told him that he was under investigation. And now he has just been indicted on 4 felonies because they claim that he violated HIPAA laws by disclosing this whistleblower information, which, by the way, was completely redacted. There was no personally identifiable information on any of the forms that he provided to the journalists that he was giving the story to anonymously, which, by the way, he still doesn't know how they found him. But everything was redacted, and that didn't stop the Biden DOJ from showing up at his door and from subsequently charging him with 4 felonies. He now faces up to 10 years in prison and up to a $250,000 fine for, again, I just don't want it to be lost on everyone, for telling the truth.
Wow. And the truth shall cost you a lot of money in jail time. I mean,
yeah. Yeah,
like the
exactly.
opposite of what we're, growing up, we're all taught, tell the truth, don't lie. The truth will set you free. Nope. Not against the Biden DOJ.
Yep.
Just horrible what they're trying to do to this man who, like, obviously we need his skill set
Right.
as like a trauma surgeon. Like, that's a big deal. And now they pull him out of the system because they would rather mutilate children than have a skilled physician tell the truth. And it's just absolutely disgusting.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's actually, if you want me to, let me add to this story really quickly, just to bring it full circle here. There's actually a second whistleblower that just came out the day after he appeared in court for all of his indictments, and also now is alleging that not only was this hospital committing illegal acts in the state of Texas by keeping this department open in secret, they were also committing Medicaid fraud by listing these children as the wrong gender on these forms. These were all Medicaid patients. And in the state of Texas, Medicaid funds cannot go to any of these operations, any of these, treatments. And they were billing, presumably because these were Medicaid patients, they were billing Medicaid for these procedures. Let's say a biological female is taking testosterone. Well, she's listed on the paper as a male. And then, of course, the procedures get paid for because, of course, a male could take testosterone. That's totally allowed. And so now she's alleging that, and now they're under investigation by Attorney General Ken Paxton. But again, I mean, that doesn't change the fact that this doctor is still being politically persecuted. So people need to be aware that this is happening. Even in the state of Texas, things like this can happen. And the FBI and the Biden's weaponized DOJ, there is no state that you are safe from them threatening and intimidating and harassing you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully this Medicaid thing can open the door to, helping this doctor, but such a tragedy.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question. I know how valuable your time is.
Are we already done? This has been so fun.
I know, it's gone by really fast. Heritage President Ken Roberts went on MSNBC with host Simone Sanders. Kevin asked, how can you explain to parents that their child has been R-worded or killed when an illegal was allowed into the country? Simone Sanders then stops the president of the Heritage group and says, you can't call them illegals. You have to call them undocumented. He refuses. And then the rest of the show isn't about the fact that illegals are murdering, R-wording, kidnapping, doing all kinds of horrific things. It's about how to properly label people who have illegally broken into the country. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we are living at, such a wild time, Stephen, where we are even having to have this conversation. Of course, it's more egregious that all of these illegals are coming in and committing all of these unspeakable crimes. I mean, ask Laken Riley or Molly Tibbetts' parents, Laken Riley's parents, Molly Tibbetts' parents, all of these, this poor young girl that just got killed in the state of Texas. I mean, ask all of these family members of all of these girls whether or not they care that you hurt an immigrant's feelings by calling them illegal. And yet we have these leftists in their elite bubbles, right? They're like sitting in their ivory towers like, oh, you can't offend these illegal immigrants by calling them what they are. That would be too mean. We don't care about the killings. We don't care about the R words. We just care about being politically correct. And so they're just so unrelatable with the American people who are sitting back and watching the total destruction of this country because of Joe Biden's open borders policy. It's just, I think it's going to backfire on them. I mean, I will say this. I think what was this on MSNBC? Maybe their 5 viewers liked it, but I think for the most part, Americans have really tuned out to this rhetoric because they see these people as so out of touch with reality and what the average American, what we are dealing with every single day. They're like, yeah, I'm not watching this garbage anymore.
Yeah. It's like, Ted Bundy, the famous serial killer, at least he was famous through Utah because he was here, but it's like,
he was famous.
Yeah. Like, like doing all these horrible things to women. And then, like, oh, somebody misgendered him. Right. Oh gosh, set all of that to the side. We've got to talk about his proper pronouns and whether he was born a male or a female and the ratio of his X to Y chromosome and his hormone and blood levels. And Like, oh my gosh, give me a break. Like a child,
Yeah.
had this horrible experience. How do you explain this to children? Hold on. You cannot be calling them illegals, even though they illegally came into the country. It's like we're bending over backwards for the smallest, stupidest thing, but that's what they focus on so that no real progress in legislation or criminal justice can actually take place.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I would say that they started this process when they asked everyone to use the proper pronouns, or I should say the improper pronouns, really, but to use people's preferred pronouns. You don't want to hurt their feelings. And so what they told you to do was totally deny reality, okay, totally deny truth, and instead just use the words that will not hurt this person's feelings. And now what we've seen is that we've moved from use the words that are not true, that because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, to use the words that are completely true. But you don't want to do that because you might hurt someone's feelings. And so it's just like we've shifted into this words, I guess, mean nothing because we're supposed to say things that are not true, but we can't say things that are true, all for fear of hurting someone's feelings. It's really crazy how we've gotten this far in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, well, I'm not at all worried about hurting a rapist's feelings. In fact,
Nope.
I believe that they should be left alone with the dad in a room for 10 minutes.
Yep.
And see what happens. But that's just my opinion. I know it's not very popular. Okay, final thing, and then I appreciate you coming on. There is a lot of speculation about who might be the vice presidential pick. Trump has teased this person will be at the debate. You can try to figure out. Now Twitter's going bonkers because he secretly flew out of Cleveland, Ohio, where Vivek is, but also JD Vance is from Ohio. Any guesses before the debate on who it might be?
So I would say this. It did make me a little bit uncomfortable that I keep seeing Doug Burgum on with all of these mainstream, shows on CNN and what have you. I do not want a Doug Burgum VP pick. I've seen that he has these ties with Bill Gates and the WEF. And so I would say I would love it if he would pick JD Vance. I don't know that he does, but I will tell you this. I think it would be the smartest pick if you want to push the movement into future generations. He's young. He can carry the torch. He's an ideologue when it comes to all of these policies that Donald Trump obviously has either already implemented or plans to implement. And so I think that he would be the obvious choice. But it just depends on what their mentality is, what their strategy is, because I also will say, I'm not sure how many people he's going to pull from the middle because he is just like Trump, right? He has the same policies as Trump. He is very much America first. But I'm not sure that you need to pull people from the middle at this point. I think the distinction between Joe Biden's America and Donald Trump should be very clear to people by this point. And I hope that they pick JD Vance. I think that would be a solid pick. He's great on his feet. He would be great in a debate against bumbling doofus Kamala Harris, who all she can do is stand and laugh because she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. And so I hope that it's JD Vance.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, we will find out here before the week is up, or they'll keep the mystery going. Trump seems to like to keep people on their toes as often as possible. I want to push people towards your YouTube channel. So I'm going to put a direct link down below. Go check out Sara's channel, also your Twitter account, so that people can keep in the loop on what you're covering. Every one of us seems to cover different angles and stories. And so I definitely want people to get exposure to your information. What is the name of the show so that people can also search it?
Sure. It's called Sara Gonzales Unfiltered, and there is no H in Sara. It's just an unnecessary letter, S at the end of Gonzales, and you will be able to find me, unless, of course, big tech is suppressing me, as they do.
Well, that's why I'm going to put that direct link. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. You're someone that I've wanted to have on for a long time. I'm glad we were able to make it work with our two calendars. And thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well. It's been an honor.